I'm really pleased to introduce the panel. Today, first we have Linh Peters. She's the former CMO of Walgreens, among other many amazing companies, global CMO of Calvin Klein and Starbucks, et cetera. We also have Mara Sirhal. She is the Chief Merchant and Brand Officer at Saks Off Fifth. You'll have Surabhi Pokhriyal, Chief Digital and Growth Officer at Church & Dwight, which is a CPG company that has, 20 brands or so under it. Okay, so, no small P&L there. And finally, leading the discussion is Cindy Marshall, who is the founder and CEO of Shine Strategies. So I will let Cindy take it away, and please welcome them to the stage.
So my name is Cindy Marshall. I'm the founder and CEO of Shine Strategy. I've actually been on the board of Women in Retail Leadership for over 9 years. And Melissa Campanelli was originally going to take this session, and she couldn't be here, so I was delighted to be asked to moderate. And if you don't know about Women in Retail Leadership and want to learn more, feel free to ask me later, but we're a exclusive member organization for senior retail women executives, and our mission is to foster development, leadership development, as well as sharing and teaching and learning through content, events, and connections. So my company, Shine Strategy, is 12 years old. We're focused on interim and fractional C-level positions, chief marketing officers, chief digital officers, and I've just added a new component to the business. As of yesterday, we relaunched the website and have added Laura Ravo, who's here as our executive career and performance coach, as well as interim COO. I started out my career 10 years in direct marketing, and then spent a number of years in omni-channel, and I live in Vermont with my husband Craig and my yellow lab Sunny. And so I'm going to turn it over to Surabhi to introduce herself.
Thank you.
Well, everybody will introduce themselves and then share a little fun fact.
All right. Hi, everyone. Surabhi Pokhriyal. Thank you, Cindy. Thanks, team, for having me here. So I'm the Chief Digital Growth Officer at Church & Dwight. It sounds like a law firm, but it's not. Because you know the brands like Arm & Hammer, Waterpik, Trojan, White Effusion, Mighty Patch Hero. And it's a $6 billion company. I own the e-com P&L and the media measurement analytics functions. I've been fairly CPG promiscuous. I started with Procter & Gamble, went to consulting, went to J&J, Colgate, and now at Church & Dwight. So CPG and staying close to where the consumer shops and how she shops is a passion for me. I live near Princeton, New Jersey with my husband and 2 kids. Fun fact, between the 4 of us, we speak about 6 languages. 4 are Indian, and the other 2 that my kids speak is what they learn at school. My daughter goes to an all-Spanish immersion school where English is her second language, and that's our choice because we believe for our kids to learn cultures and different values across the world is very important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Surabhi. Hi, everybody. I'm Mara Sirhal, and I'm Chief Merchant and Brand Officer at Saks Off Fifth. And I am first a wife, mom, daughter, all those things. So my husband and I live with our 2 kids in suburban New Jersey. And really excited to be here today and share the stage with these ladies. And also just, I think, be vulnerable, right? So that's what this is all about. So thanks for the tee up with that, Jill. And fun fact, it's not as serious as Surabhi. I'm so impressed because unfortunately I only speak 1 language. But my husband and I have decided we're going to be like 16 again, and we've been going to concerts like crazy the last 2 years. So it's been a lot of fun. And we're just trying to relive the glory years here while raising kids. But anyway, so that's my fun fact for now. Always evolving. Linh, over to you.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Linh Peters. Former CMO at Walgreens, and before that have spent over 2 decades of my career always working in some type of consumer-facing brand, mainly retail, based in Seattle. And I'm super excited to be here and be on this panel. And I think, as Jill said, I think one of the opportunities for us is just to have, I think, an open conversation and dialogue. And we're excited to be here to share our perspective, but also, welcome any questions that you guys might have. Fun fact about me, I actually was recently honored to be asked to give a commencement address. So I gave the commencement address at the University of Minnesota, which is my alma mater. So I had a fun job of sending off about 1,400 graduates. So.
Wow, that's great. Good, well, thank you. So our first question is, I'm going to address this to Amara, and then Lynn will go next, is can you share a pivotal moment in your career that you had an obstacle you had to overcome, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah. So, of course, we've probably had all had many obstacles over the years. The one I would draw on, for today is I did spend 2 years at Bed Bath & Beyond, and one of those years was, unfortunately, sort of as the company was under, significant distress, and then ultimately, filed for bankruptcy. And so I joined Bed Bath after leaving Macy's for 20 years and decided to make this big step of moving to a different sector of retail, also a different role, hopefully.
You're not hitting it.
I don't know if it's me. Okay. So, and accepting this role just to really broaden out my horizons, and then really join the company to run one of the smaller businesses. And then after a year, I was asked to take on a chief merchant role, but as I matriculated into that role, there were significant leadership changes at that time, so I was no longer reporting to the CEO that I had interviewed with, essentially. And then that year, stepping into the role, first of all, my first C-level, board level role. I think it was my blouse. We were having some issues. Lace is not my friend this morning, I think. And, my first C-level role. And what a way to take on a first C-level role and dealing with a company that was under great distress. But more importantly, a lot of really treasured colleagues that had given their entire careers to the company who were experiencing the most traumatic time in their career. And so as I reflect back on it, there was a lot of literal blood, sweat, and tears that went into sort of that year and how we navigated it together as a team. But keeping at the forefront, just taking care of people and being transparent and communicating with them, listening to them, what were they scared about, what were their needs. And I think for me, that experience, although again, an interesting way to sort of matriculate to that level, it also sort of underscored what I think is, one of my superpowers, in that, I really connect with people and I'm comfortable being vulnerable. So it was okay. I was shedding tears along with them some days, right? So really finding the opportunity to connect, even in the hard decision time frame that was. So that's what I draw on, I think, from that experience.
Thank you, Mara. Lynn?
Sure. So, I think all of us in our careers have dealt with a challenging manager. I think it's going to probably happen more than once in your career. And I think it's a very different experience to experience that as an individual contributor. But when you are a people leader and you have a team, it's a whole different ballgame. And there was a point in my career where I took a role, and I kind of had an inkling that my manager was going to be somewhat of a difficult leader, but I was really well prepared. I figured I could handle it. And then what I ended up finding out after I joined the organization was that he was an incredibly toxic leader just overall in the organization, right? So not only to, as my direct leader, but also just with his peer set, with our customers, with our B2B customers. And so it really forced me as a leader to really figure out how I was going to not only manage him for my career development, but also just manage him across the board with my team. And there was one specific incident that happened where he made an incredibly disparaging, what I would almost call, intimidating, bullying remark to somebody on my team. And I was just so appalled by it and just taken aback. It had never happened before in my career. And I just took a lot of time to think about, okay, what am I going to do about this, right? Aside from kind of consoling my team member and, trying to, help them through the situation, I recognized as a leader that I actually needed to do something bigger, because The issue is that he was this executive in the organization. A lot of people, felt that he had a tremendous amount of power, and there was a sense of fear about speaking up. And at that time, he was kind of, being groomed as the successor to the CEO. And so I actually went to HR, and I had a really honest conversation with HR. It wasn't even about me. It was more about the sense of like, this was the message that we were sending to the broader organization, that you could show up as a leader and be toxic and, sort of just not lead with values and be rewarded. And it was the only time in my career that I've ever cried in front of HR, because I just was, felt like we just needed to do something about it as an organization. And they actually took action. And they handled the situation. And then I found out after the fact that he had kind of been this way for years, and that many people had kind of just felt like they couldn't say anything. And what surprised me was that, this was a role where I think I was the only woman on the executive team. And I had all of these other men coming to thank me afterwards, his peers, and saying, thank you for doing something. And what it taught me is that as leaders of people, we have such a tremendous responsibility to the people that we lead. And the other piece that I would offer up is that I think as a leader, you also need to decide what your values are and what I would consider your non-negotiables to be, and make sure that you always lead with that, and that you kind of have it at the forefront, because everybody is watching you, your teams are counting on you to make the right decision and to act on their behalf. And it's something that I've carried with me, I think, since then, in terms of how I lead with my team and work with others.
That was great, thank you. Shows the vulnerability. So now we're going to move on to, as trailblazers in the industry, how would you, what would you recommend for the skills that that women need as strong leaders? So I'm going to start with Surabhi here.
Sure. I will share something super vulnerable, but if you go to my LinkedIn, you can find it organically also, because I've highlighted it there. So I graduated from business school in India and got hired at Procter & Gamble in the IT department. I wanted to be in the marketing department. That's where the cool kids hung out. So I did not get to be an ABM, but that's exactly what I wanted. And very early, right, my mom would also say that as a kid, no is not an answer I take very easily. Like, it just means not now to me. Like, okay, we'll figure it out. So I navigated through all of the years to where I am today. And when I speak in marketing forum, FOB, CMO, and so many other things, people don't even know I did not grow up in marketing. So why I share this very transparently with everybody I meet now, especially people who I mentor, where you start does not determine where you will go. Not your education, not your first job, not your pedigree college, not your parents, not your demographic, nothing will determine that beyond you. So I think sheer grit and determination is a soft skill where people's no should sometimes give you fire to go more towards the thing that you want than get distressed and dejected about it. So that is one. Second, always be looking for jobs that put you into slight discomfort. If you have the 100% of the job description that you have done, oh, I'll nail it, please don't do those jobs. What's the point of doing that? Of course, sometimes we do things for money, and that's valid, and everybody's personal situation is different. But if 60-70% of the job you are applying for and you know it, that's awesome. Keep 20-30% room to be uncomfortable, to wake up with slight amount of distress, saying, how do I do this? How am I going to study for it? That will push you into discomfort. That will give you growth, both intellectually and in leadership ways. So that's my personal value system. I don't think it's limited to retail sector as such, but as long as you push the boundaries on yourself, you'll be able to do the same to the people around you.
That was great, thank you. How about Mara?
Yeah, I love that, Surabhi. Thank you. I'm making my mental notes. So I'm going to say a very weird, sort of, I think, provocative word to answer this question, which is selfish. And so I see some team members here, but this is something that I've shared with anybody that I've worked with or has sought my advice, or maybe not sought my advice, and I just decided to give it. But your career is the one place in your life you can be completely selfish. And selfish doesn't mean you're not collaborating with others and there's not a give and take as you are on a team, but it really is every role you take, every move you make, every decision and things you set out before you and to reach your goals should be in service to you and you alone. Because I'm sure we've all had opportunities and times when someone's come to and said, here's this great role, you should take this over here. And you're kind of like, is it? Is that the right role for me? Is that really going to give me what I need? Or is that what's best for that person or even the company? And that's not to say that you sometimes don't need a good dose of tough love from a mentor that says, no, that might be a job you want to consider for these reasons, right? So there's always that balance. But don't take jobs to serve other people. Taking jobs, positions, opportunities, it has to serve you, and it's okay to be selfish in that, and that alone. Because we all, whether you're male or female, make a lot of sacrifices in our day-to-day lives with our partners, our children, our kids, our pets, etc. And this is one you really don't need to compromise on. So that would be what I would add.
Thank you. So now I want to ask the audience, how many of you have a mentor? Raise your hands. And how many of you are mentors to others? Great, I love that. Okay, so our next question is all around mentorship. And I'm going to ask everybody to talk about that. So how do you approach mentorship and sponsorship in your career as a mentor or someone that's seeking mentorship? So I'm going to start with Lynn.
Sure. So mentorship is incredibly important and has been very pivotal in my career success. The way that I approach mentorship, and I adopted this probably, a number of years ago, but I think sometimes when you think about mentorship, it's this idea of like, okay, there's going to be one person that's going to do everything for me. And you'll find that there isn't one person, even the best of them, that can, provide you all the right words of wisdom and guidance in your career. And so I've adopted a board of directors approach. And what that means is I have 5 or 6 people that I have cultivated relationships with over the years, and they each play a very different role. And so I have, somebody in my network who was a former mentor who, I look at him and he's always like pushing me to like take chances, right? He's the risk person. He's like, just go do it. If you fail, it's no big deal. I have somebody else on my board of directors who's a very good friend of mine. She's also a fellow executive, and she's the person and my confidant. And we can have very honest conversations about the challenges, and the opportunities and the successes that we've seen as executives. There are other folks that I talk to that are very specific to my track as a marketer. And so the reason that I say that is because it has given me the opportunity to get lots of different perspectives and advice. Sometimes I'll ask all 5 or 6 of them the same question and I get a very different answer. And so it helps just give me, more perspective, more information. And I think if you think about sort of like that network and if you kind of spider that out, because I've had those relationships, they often introduce me to other people that I've been able to network with. And so it's just been a really helpful approach for me. In terms of mentorship, I mentor a lot of folks. It is incredibly important to me. And it is something that I enjoy doing and I think is really important if we want to change, what the landscape looks like for women and people of color in executive roles. And so oftentimes when I talk to folks, I tell them 3 things. I think number 1, it's kind of a little bit like dating, right? You kind of have to have the same chemistry and the vibe. And so just, if you're not feeling it with somebody, it's perfectly fine. It's okay to just say, hey, you know what? Thank you for the conversation, and move on. I think the other thing is like when you do establish a relationship, be proactive and lead the conversation. I think coming prepared and asking a thoughtful question or being very clear about the intent of the conversation is important. The other piece that I would say is that oftentimes you're talking about very confidential things, right? Or they're sharing very confidential information or perspective with you. So just be respectful and I think discreet with the information that people are sharing with you. And the last piece is I would say just be really appreciative. I'm always incredibly happy to talk to folks, and I think it's always nice when people reflect back that I took the time to them. So just be appreciative, follow up, and just kind of appreciate the relationship.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Gosh, I'm the board of directors approach. I'm loving that. I'm gonna write that down and steal it if that's okay. I think that's the point of today. So anyway,
No, I love it.
but I love it. But I would just build a little bit on what Lynn shared as it relates to when approaching sort of who can be my mentor, right? And I think when I often talk with people, it's like this check the box, right? Versus it really does need to be an authentic connection. And I'm sure that board of directors that Lynn described, she's spent years and years cultivating those relationships. So I think number 1 is patience and time. It does take patience, it does take time, but almost having that running list of who are the mentors, supervisors, or I guess supervisors, people you admired, maybe you didn't directly work for, that could be a mentor, right? And having that running list of folks and just keeping in touch with them, seeking their counsel, seeing if, the advice you're getting resonates and that it sticks with you, and just trying it out, and I think being really consistent in building those relationships more deeply, and deeper. And again, listen, most people feel, a lot of, I think, humility and pride when someone comes to them for advice. I mean, I certainly do. I really feel very valued, and so always make the assumption that if you're going to somebody, likely they're going to be very happy to take some time to talk with you. So just taking the time, be patient about building those connections. And then I think as a mentor, the role, looking and flipping the tables is, number one, really making sure you're making time, and you're never too busy to take a call, even if it's at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. Hey, let's hop on the phone, especially if that person's really needing to noodle through something. So I think just being really available, if you do serve in a mentor role. It sounds simple, but it is hard when we're balancing as many things as we are. So.
That's so wonderful. I'm taking mental notes and thinking, what do I have to add incrementally, really? So I'll just try to be incremental to the extent, that wasn't spoken. One thing I personally believe, intellectual growth is important at every step in career. It doesn't matter if you're CEO or board member or you feel you have arrived in life. So I also engage with the board of directors, but I also have reverse mentors with much younger people than me. So I have a couple of 25-year-olds who are outstanding in the jobs and work that they do. I've also had executives who cannot tell the difference between Instagram and Instacart, right? No disrespect, but that's practical because I don't live the life of Snapchat that my 15-year-old does. I've tried to download, but I'm just not able to engage, and I leave it. But I have to learn from we can't say we speak to the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and we don't live that life. So we need to be engaged with people who can mentor us on skills that are new age and that are happening, and we don't want to get rusty, having too much pride in how accomplished and how awesome we are because we get to sit on big stages and lots of people look up and listen to us. So that's one on reverse mentorship. Second, I'd say for women in particular, we are almost mentored to death. What I mean by that is, there's a lot of leaders who, like you rightly said, people love the humility and pride in mentoring folks. So many people will mentor women and coach and guide them, but not many of us have sponsors. And there's a discrete difference between mentorship and sponsorship. You seek mentorship, you cannot really seek sponsorship because sponsors will seek you. So how do you navigate in your current mentor relationships or other places, because only people in quote unquote power will likely be sponsors. Right? My reverse mentors cannot be my sponsors today. I'm sure 10 years from now, a lot of them will do awesome things and then they can be my sponsors. But how do you navigate that? You intentionally build a sponsor network also, both within your job and outside, where indoors and meetings where you do not sit, who is speaking your name, why are they speaking it, and what are they speaking about? So,
I love that about the sponsors. That's great. Thank you. So work-life balance, is there such a thing? When we were prepping for this, we were talking about it like there really isn't a work-life balance, but what do we do with facing our personal situations when we're in high-stress situations at work? And so how do we bring it home or not bring it home? So Mara, I think you were going to start here.
Sure, yeah, and we did have a lot of discussion about this question because female panels always get this question. So we come to you today, we're thrilled to answer it again. But I think no matter what, it's always, I think, really enriching and energizing to hear, the different perspectives. I think also, I want to just say, I think it's like a badge of honor that women always get this question because we do balance a lot. We are incredible multitaskers, and there are some inherent things about, just our gender that, I think lend to it. But ultimately, there's, you've heard it a million times, there is no balance. There's just, this and that. I think at the end of the day, it's finding in your personal life, where are your touchstones? What's your support system? Whether that's a spouse or, a friend or, a parent or whomever that person is. But finding really, in your personal life, what is going to bring you back to earth and kind of shake you up a bit and hold you accountable, in that way. And I think, some advice from my mother, Wendy Radakovich, and I'll tell her I name checked her here today, is, whomever that person is, right? That relationship's not always 50-50, right? It could be 90-10. Certainly my husband has done more for my career than probably anybody, and I really mean that. And I wouldn't be here without, his support, but there's been a lot of times he's had to be the 90, right? And I think just communicating openly, what are your goals? How is that gonna look for that year? What support might you need from that person? And then likewise, what you can lend to that person as well, right? And again, it doesn't have to be a spouse, it can be anybody, but I think that accountability checkpoint and really helping you understand what's important and what's going to bring ultimately you joy and satisfaction in your life is a really important key to it. But there is no secret sauce. I think it's just everybody's individual. So Lynn, over to you.
Yeah. So I would say, I think two things that I would share. I think to Mara's point, there's probably a million, tips and tricks out there. But two things that I found helpful. Number one, kind of going with the theme that Mara was talking about earlier, be unapologetic about saying no. You do not have to apologize for what you choose to spend your time doing. And I think we often feel like we always have to kind of apologize when we say no. One of the best pieces of advice that I have been given, whether it is contemplating a new job, contemplating, even a meeting or going on a business trip, is what is worthy of your time. That is the one thing that we all share in this room, is that we all have the same, we have time, right? Regardless of, what your job is or social status or any of those things. And so really think about what is worthy of your times in terms of dedicating to it. And then the other one is that, that I have found helpful is that I think as parents, if you're a parent, you struggle sometimes with but work and career and then making time for your family. And I went to a conference once, and it was, we kind of did this training, and it was really talking about reframing things, especially with your children. And so, as a mom, I have two children. I have a 8th and a 10th grader, and it's you're always feeling like you're missing something, right? A sporting event, a concert, whatever. And one of the speakers basically said, reframe how you position with your kids, right? So instead of saying oh my gosh, I cannot go to your soccer game, just think about it as hey, you know what? You are so lucky. You are so lucky that you have an awesome mom who has a great job that can afford you this opportunity to play soccer. And that was such a different perspective for me. And ever since then, I have tried to carry that in terms of just how I speak to my kids with my career. In my instance, my husband is a stay-at-home dad, so it's very much a role reversal. But it has just helped me feel less guilty about things. And I think it also just creates a different conversation with your children about the importance of career, and that it isn't a dirty word, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be less of a parent or a spouse because you choose to really love your job.
That's great, thank you. So I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip a couple of the questions, but move on to one that we were talking a lot about, which is ambition comes in all forms of being a healthy leader. So as female leaders, can you share an example of when your ambition was challenged and you may have experienced a double standard? So I think we're going to start with Lynn on that.
Sure. So my first big executive job that I got required my family to relocate. And I was really surprised by some of the reactions that I got from even my family members. And so I heard two things. I heard one, make sure it's the perfect job. It's got to check all the boxes before you take it. Kind of what Mara said is you kind of have to go, if it's not the perfect job, especially as a woman, don't take it. And then number two, I actually had people tell me that it was going to be incredibly disruptive to my family if I was going to move them. And at the time I had, little children. And it did two things for me. Number one, it got me to really focus on intentionality in my career. So focusing on the why, why you're taking your job, why you're making this move, why you're taking an opportunity has been incredibly important. And you'll find that as you progress through your career, that's the one question that you'll get from recruiters and HR, right? Why did you take this job? Why did you leave this job? So be very intentional about that. And the other piece that it did is that it really taught me to think about my career as a high-performing athlete. So if you're a high-performing athlete, you're going to, surround yourself with like the best nutrition and like trainers and all these things. And it's like, okay, why wouldn't you kind of think about that as your career, right? Because it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And because of that conversation, I thought about all the things that I need to do in order to prove myself to be successful. And one of the things that I did that was very pivotal is that I actually started working with an executive coach. And I work with her to this day. It's probably after my husband, it's like the second longest relationship that I've ever had. But just incredibly helpful. She has helped me, through every situation. She has been with me through like 5 or 6 transitions of jobs. But it's just something that I gave myself as a gift. And I think sometimes you don't think about ourselves and kind of being selfish and really surrounding yourself with all the things that you might need in order to be successful. So
I love that. Mara?
Yeah, I would, I think, just add on to that as it relates to that being unapologetically ambitious. Like, I don't even know if we really need to put that word in front of it, right? Ambition is good, and ultimately, that should be celebrated no matter what, right? And so ultimately, if you're running into situations where that's being challenged, it's likely because there's an individual that is feeling threatened, that doesn't have the confidence to celebrate you, right? And it's this concept around, we can lift as we climb. There's nothing that says that seeing all of those around you be successful as well doesn't reflect back on you, right? Whether you're just a peer to that person and supporting them, or a supervisor, or maybe you're reporting to that individual. But helping them succeed is just as valuable to your own success. And I think really being able to parse the two apart. And we often, when we are challenged, our ambition is challenged, we look to ourselves, well, what am I doing? Or how is this going to make this and that person feel? But we really need to, I think, flip back and say, okay, well, what is it that person may be dealing with that, is going to hinder, my progress? Knowing that we're running a little short on time, I would also just pull in, I think, balancing sort of being assertive and being vulnerable, because they are not mutually exclusive and they can both exist, because vulnerability can be anything from sharing in front of a big group of people, mistakes you've made, to having a one-on-one with somebody that just came back from maternity leave. In my case, where I brought in many women that have come back that, hey, I've struggled with, the reentry, and I had postpartum anxiety and depression, and this is what to look for. And, that can be vulnerability as well. But assertive is assertive is assertive. So you should, there should be no sort of but next to it, or, unapologetically. It's just, it is what it is. And as an executive, that should be, something that you should be fairly free to exert and use as you move through. So.
Surabhi?
I don't have much to add. I'll just say on work-life balance in particular, I believe in the concept of work-life sway now. There'll be days where you'll be doing grocery and going to your kids' events in the middle of a work day and blocking out 2 hours, and that's fine. And there'll be days you'll be on 9 o'clock calls and not be able to put your 8-year-old to bed. So don't hold very high standards to yourself and try to strive for a balance that does not exist, and it's elusive. On the topic of vulnerability, I feel for women in particular, there is not yet the time that we can be as vulnerable. Let's just start with us being authentic first. It's almost like the crawl, walk, run. So if we can be real, be authentic, where people who listen to us, who talk to us, can believe she says what she means and she's walking the talk, that's a start. And vulnerability will follow. I have with my direct reports and leaders some trust building exercises, and sometimes we share very intentionally very vulnerable things, like people would speak about the loss of a child, a parent going through psychiatric issues, and so many other things. But as you bare yourself, as you open the kimono, you invite other people to bare themselves, but you can't force it. So I think it starts with a journey of being truly authentic, which is such a cliched word. It's spoken so well, but done so little. And I think people can sniff through, human beings can sniff through inauthentic conversations when people just know. You just know. You don't have to have a degree for that. And, you just lean on that.
So we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to bring Jill up. So thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time.